Imagine standing in a dimly lit martial arts studio in Hong Kong, 1959. The air is thick with incense and tradition. The wooden floors worn smooth by decades of disciplined footwork. A young man with fire in his eyes and an unshakable determination in his stance faces his master, eager to push beyond the rigid boundaries of conventional martial arts. His muscles tense with barely contained energy as the master scrutinizes him with disapproval. You think too much, you lack discipline, your mind wanders when it should be still. You cannot become a legend this way, the master says dismissively, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. That young man was Bruce Lee, and those words of doubt, rather than crushing his spirit, would ignite a revolutionary flame in martial arts that continues to inspire millions of practitioners and fighters today. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless like water. When you put water into a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. These words, spoken with the quiet confidence of profound understanding, would become Bruce Lee's most iconic philosophy. Resonating through decades of martial arts evolution and personal development, these words, perhaps Bruce Lee's most famous, weren't just about fighting technique or martial prowess. They represented his entire philosophy for life itself, a powerful, adaptive response to a world that constantly tried to box him in, that repeatedly told him what he couldn't do, who he couldn't be, and what boundaries he must never cross. They were the crystallization of his understanding that true strength lies not in rigid resistance, but in ultimate adaptability. The 1960s martial arts landscape was a maze of rigid traditions and cultural fortifications. Each style was an island unto itself, surrounded by walls of prejudice and pride. Chinese masters, guardians of ancient knowledge, steadfastly refused to teach Westerners, viewing their arts as sacred cultural treasures that must be protected from outside influence. Different styles remained isolated in their own bubbles, their practitioners proudly claiming superiority while carefully avoiding any real tests against different approaches. Karate stayed separate from Kung Fu. Judo practitioners rarely crossed paths with boxers, and each discipline convinced itself of its own supremacy. It was a world of walls, of barriers, both physical and philosophical, and Bruce Lee was about to become the water that would find every crack and crevice in these artificial divisions. Born in San Francisco in 1940, but raised in the bustling streets of Hong Kong, Lee existed between worlds from the very beginning, straddling the divide between East and West. Neither fully American nor traditionally Chinese, he learned early and often that identity wasn't something fixed and unchangeable, but rather something fluid that could adapt and flow like the water he would later famously reference. When he returned to America at 18, he carried with him not just his extensive training in Wing Chun Kung Fu, but something far more valuable, an unquenchable curiosity and a willingness to question everything, even the most sacred traditions. In Seattle, while working as a waiter to make ends meet and teaching martial arts to anyone willing to learn, Lee committed what many traditional Chinese masters considered an unforgivable sin. He opened his doors to non-Chinese students, breaking centuries of tradition, he declared. Martial arts knowledge is not the property of any one culture or race. Even as death threats arrived at his door from those who saw his actions as cultural betrayal, he taught with passion and purpose, sharing his knowledge with students of all backgrounds, believing that martial arts should be a bridge between cultures rather than a wall. The martial arts establishment pushed back hard against this revolutionary approach. Traditional masters and their devoted followers saw his willingness to teach outsiders as nothing less than betrayal of sacred traditions. They viewed his questioning of traditional forms and techniques as disrespect to centuries of martial arts history. "You cannot be a legend by breaking with tradition," they told him, their voices heavy with disapproval and warning. Some even challenged him to fights, hoping to prove the superiority of their traditional approaches. But like water facing an obstacle, Lee didn't stop. He simply changed form and continued flowing. When met with resistance, he adapted. When faced with challenges, he evolved. He studied boxing, fencing, and other fighting styles, incorporating what worked and discarding what didn't. This approach would eventually lead to the development of his own style, Jeet Kune Do, way of the intercepting fist. History is full of pivotal moments when those who adapted changed the world, revolutionizing their fields by daring to think differently. Consider the story of Muhammad Ali, who revolutionized boxing, not by following the textbook stance and style, but by creating his own path, floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee. Ali refused to fight according to expectations, creating his own unique style that confused and dominated opponents. Or think of Apple founder Steve Jobs, who, like Lee, understood that true innovation comes from questioning established norms and finding new ways to flow around obstacles. Jobs, who once said, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower," embodied the same revolutionary spirit that Lee demonstrated throughout his journey. Like Lee, Jobs understood that true mastery meant breaking free from conventional wisdom and charting new territories. Both men recognized that blind adherence to tradition without understanding its essence was a path to stagnation rather than growth. They saw that true innovation comes not from completely abandoning the past, but from understanding it deeply enough to know which elements to preserve and which to transcend. But to comprehend how Bruce Lee transformed into the fluid, adaptable force that would revolutionize martial arts, we must trace back to the Crucible, where his journey began. Hong Kong in the 1950s was a pressure cooker of humanity, a densely packed metropolis, where survival often meant fighting. The crowded streets, humid air thick with the scent of street food and commerce, became young Bruce Lee's first training ground. Street fights weren't just common. They were inevitable in this urban jungle where different gangs controlled their territories with iron fists. His father, Lee Hoi Chuen, a well-known Cantonese opera star, watched with growing concern as his son's fighting reputation grew. Understanding that raw talent without direction could lead to disaster, he made a decision that would alter the course of martial arts history. He introduced his son to Ip Man, the legendary grandmaster of Wing Chun Kung Fu. Ip Man wasn't just another martial arts instructor in a city full of masters. He was a living embodiment of Wing Chun's effectiveness, having refined his art through countless real-world encounters and decades of dedicated practice. His reputation preceded him like a force field stories of his fights during the turbulent years in China. His ability to defeat much larger opponents and his profound understanding of combat principles made him both respected and feared in martial arts circles. Under Ip Man's meticulous guidance, Lee immersed himself in the sophisticated world of Wing Chun. The system's core principles resonated deeply with his analytical mind. Economy of motion using the shortest distance between 2 points. Sensitivity to an opponent's energy, feeling their intentions before they materialize. And centerline theory, controlling the most direct path to an opponent's vital areas. But what truly set Lee apart wasn't just his extraordinary physical capabilities, his lightning-fast reflexes, explosive power, or uncanny coordination. It was his relentless intellectual curiosity that made him unique among Ip Man's students. While other practitioners dutifully repeated traditional forms thousands of times, accepting each movement as gospel, Lee's mind constantly probed deeper. He questioned every aspect of his training with an intensity that would have been considered disrespectful in most traditional martial arts schools. "Why this angle?" he would ask, analyzing the geometric principles behind each technique. "Why this stance?" he would inquire, exploring the biomechanics of power generation. "Why this limitation?" he would challenge, pushing against artificial boundaries set by tradition rather than practicality. Ip Man, displaying a wisdom that transcended traditional martial arts teaching, recognized something extraordinary in his headstrong student. "A good teacher protects his pupils from his own influence," he observed, understanding that true mastery comes not from blind imitation, but from personal discovery. Unlike many masters who demanded unquestioning obedience, Ip Man allowed Lee's questioning nature to flourish, creating an environment where innovation could emerge from tradition. When Lee stepped onto American soil at age 18, he encountered a society that viewed him through a lens distorted by decades of stereotypes and prejudice. Hollywood's portrayal of Asian men was a gallery of caricatures, servile houseboys, sinister villains, or comic relief. Never the hero, never the romantic lead, never the powerful warrior Lee knew himself to be. The martial arts landscape was equally segregated, with traditional schools operating like exclusive clubs where ethnicity determined access. Chinese schools zealously guarded their knowledge, considering authentic kung fu a cultural treasure too precious to share with outsiders. Lee's response to this segregated system was nothing short of revolutionary. In Seattle, while balancing his studies at the University of Washington with a job as a waiter, he made a decision that would shake the foundations of martial arts culture. He opened his teaching to anyone willing to learn. His students included people from all walks of life: white Americans seeking something beyond traditional Western sports, African Americans facing their own battles against discrimination, and women fighting for equality in a male-dominated field. This wasn't just teaching, it was a direct challenge to the established order. The reaction from Hong Kong and the Chinese martial arts establishment was swift and severe. Traditional masters, viewing themselves as guardians of centuries-old knowledge, saw Lee's actions as nothing less than betrayal. The situation reached its climax when Wong Jack Man, a respected practitioner from San Francisco's Chinatown, delivered an ultimatum that would lead to one of martial arts history's most controversial encounters: stop teaching non-Chinese students or face the consequences. The resulting behind-closed-doors fight in Lee's Oakland studio in 1964 became the stuff of legend, witnessed by only a handful of people, with accounts varying widely depending on who tells the story. While some claim Lee dominated the fight, others suggest it was a closer contest than expected. But the fight's true significance lay not in its outcome, but in the profound realizations it triggered in Lee's mind. "I had gone in with all this classical Wing Chun technique," Lee later confided to James Lee, one of his closest students and collaborators, "and found myself struggling against an opponent who didn't respect the rules of any single style." The frustration in his voice was palpable as he recounted the experience, a rare moment of vulnerability from a man usually brimming with confidence. The Wong Jack Man fight had shaken his foundations, forcing him to confront the limitations of traditional training methods he had previously held sacred. The fight, which dragged on for several minutes, was far longer than Lee had anticipated or trained for. His perfectly honed Wing Chun techniques, while devastating in controlled environments, proved less effective against an opponent who moved unpredictably and refused to engage according to conventional patterns. Lee found himself winded, his cardio pushed to its limits, and increasingly frustrated as his traditional techniques, which required specific angles and precise circumstances to be effective, failed to decisively end the confrontation. This grueling encounter became Bruce Lee's watershed moment, his martial arts epiphany. The realization hit him with the force of one of his own strikes. Traditional martial arts, despite their undeniable beauty and rich historical legacy, were like rigid containers, beautiful in their construction, but ultimately limiting in their application. Real combat, he understood, was like water, formless, adaptable, and impossible to contain within predetermined forms. This profound insight would catalyze a revolutionary transformation in martial arts philosophy. In the months following the Wong Jack Man fight, Lee withdrew into near total isolation, sequestering himself in a period of intense introspection and analysis. He spent countless hours in his basement gym, methodically deconstructing and reassessing everything he had ever learned about martial arts. This wasn't mere refinement of existing techniques. It was a fundamental reimagining of combat itself. The result would eventually emerge as Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, a revolutionary approach that would shake the martial arts world to its core. Research your own experience, Lee wrote extensively in his notebooks, filling pages with insights and observations. Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own. These words, scribbled in both English and Chinese, became the foundational philosophy of Jeet Kune Do. It wasn't meant to be another style to add to the countless existing ones. Rather, it was an anti-style, a liberation from the very concept of fixed patterns and rigid systems. Lee's research became obsessive and all-encompassing. He immersed himself in studying diverse fighting methods from across the globe, breaking down each discipline to its essential components. The elegant footwork of Olympic fencers caught his attention. Their ability to maintain perfect balance while launching lightning-fast attacks. He analyzed the hand speed and combination punching of Western boxers like Muhammad Ali, the devastating leg kicks of Thai fighters, the efficient throwing techniques of judo masters, and the intricate joint manipulation of jiu-jitsu experts. His study wasn't limited to martial arts. He devoured the writings of philosophers and military strategists from both Eastern and Western traditions. Even the animal kingdom became his teacher as he studied the explosive power of the tiger, the fluidity of the snake, and the intercepting techniques of the mantis. The best fighter is not a boxer, karate, or judo man, Lee wrote in his manifesto, challenging the deeply entrenched beliefs of the martial arts community. The best fighter is someone who can adapt to any style, to be formless, to adopt an individual's own style and not following the system of styles. This statement, revolutionary in its simplicity, was a direct challenge to centuries of martial arts tradition. In the martial arts landscape of the 1960s, different styles were treated with almost religious reverence, each one a closed system with its own sacred techniques, forbidden combinations, and inviolable rules. The mere suggestion that one could cherry-pick elements from different styles was considered heretical. To openly declare that traditional forms might be more constraining than liberating was nothing short of martial arts blasphemy. But Lee remained uncompromising in his pursuit of combat truth. His mantra, absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own, transcended mere fighting philosophy to become a blueprint for personal growth and self-actualization. This wasn't just about becoming a better fighter. It was about breaking free from all artificial limitations, whether in combat or in life. Jeet Kune Do emerged as a testament to simplicity and directness. Simplicity is the key to brilliance, Lee would often remind his students as he systematically stripped away elaborate movements that served more as performance art than practical combat techniques. His focus shifted to the universal fundamentals of fighting: speed, timing, and distance elements that transcended any particular style or system. These principles, he discovered, were the common thread running through all effective combat, regardless of their cultural origin or traditional packaging. Most revolutionary was Lee's unwavering emphasis on adaptability, a principle that would become the cornerstone of his martial philosophy and later influence combat sports worldwide. His famous maxim, "be like water," wasn't merely a poetic metaphor crafted for dramatic effect. It represented the fundamental core principle of his entire martial approach. Just as water possesses no fixed form or constant shape, adapting effortlessly to whatever vessel contains it, Lee believed fighters should maintain this same level of formless adaptability. Water, in its elemental wisdom, demonstrates the perfect balance of yielding and forceful properties. It can flow with gentle grace around obstacles or crash with devastating force against barriers. It can bring life-giving nourishment to parched earth or carve through solid rock with persistent force. This profound natural metaphor perfectly encapsulated how Lee believed a martial artist should approach both combat and life, remaining perpetually responsive to circumstances, never rigid in technique or mindset, always flowing with the dynamic nature of combat. But Lee's revolutionary ideas about martial arts were about to face their most formidable challenge, yet the deeply entrenched racial prejudices of Hollywood's power structure. True to his philosophy, he would need to embody the very principle of water, he taught, finding alternative pathways when conventional routes were blocked by discrimination. This test would prove that his martial philosophy extended far beyond the confines of physical combat into the broader arena of life struggles. In the late 1960s, Lee had achieved a modest but noteworthy level of fame in America through his role as Kato in the television series The Green Hornet. Though the show's run was limited to a single season, his electrifying screen presence and lightning-fast martial arts sequences left an indelible impression on viewers. His portrayal of Kato, while secondary to the main character, showcased a level of martial arts authenticity never before seen on American television. However, when the series concluded, Lee found himself trapped in the narrow confines of Hollywood's racial stereotyping, being offered only demeaning roles that perpetuated Asian stereotypes, typically as servile characters or one-dimensional villains. His greatest professional disappointment during this period came when he developed an innovative concept for a television series titled The Warrior. The show's premise was groundbreaking for its time, following the journey of a Chinese martial artist navigating the complex cultural landscape of the American Old West. Lee invested months of intensive work developing the concept, crafting detailed character arcs and storylines that would showcase both martial arts action and meaningful cultural commentary. However, Hollywood executives, bound by their narrow vision and racial prejudices, rejected the concept outright. They couldn't or wouldn't imagine American audiences accepting an Asian actor in a leading role, despite Lee's proven charisma and growing fan base. Then, in a move that epitomized Hollywood's systemic racism, Warner Brothers developed and produced a suspiciously similar show called Kung Fu. In what would become one of the industry's most notorious examples of whitewashing, instead of casting Lee an actual martial arts master of Chinese descent, they gave the leading role to David Carradine, a white actor with no martial arts background. Carradine was cast to play the half-Chinese character Kwai Chang Caine, complete with yellow-face makeup and affected mannerisms that would be considered highly offensive by today's standards. When confronted about this blatant case of whitewashing, Warner Brothers executives attempted to justify their decision with the transparent excuse that Lee's accent was too thick for American audiences to comprehend. This explanation rang hollow, particularly given Lee's clear articulation and magnetic screen presence in The Green Hornet. The real reason, as Lee painfully understood, was deeply rooted racism. Hollywood's power brokers weren't prepared to challenge their own preconceptions about Asian leading men Or more accurately, they lacked the courage to challenge what they assumed were their audience's prejudices. But true to his philosophy of adaptability, Lee responded to this obstacle like water encountering a barrier. He didn't break against it or remain stagnant, but rather found an alternative course. Rejected by Hollywood's discriminatory system, he made the strategic decision to return to Hong Kong, where he was embraced as a legitimate star. His subsequent films, The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon, shattered box office records across Asia, each one showcasing not just his extraordinary physical abilities, but also his deeper philosophy of adaptability and authentic self-expression. These films proved that audiences were more than ready for an Asian leading man who portrayed strength, dignity, and complexity. The ultimate vindication came when Warner Brothers, witnessing Lee's unprecedented success in Asian markets, finally offered him the leading role in Enter the Dragon, a groundbreaking project that would become the first major Hollywood and Hong Kong co-production. In a tragic twist of fate, Lee died unexpectedly just days before the film's premiere in 1973 at the young age of 32. However, Enter the Dragon would go on to become one of the most profitable films in Warner Brothers history, generating over $400 million worldwide when adjusted for inflation, a testament to Lee's universal appeal and the short-sightedness of those who had doubted him. Lee had proven the executives wrong in the most emphatic way possible. Audiences didn't just accept an Asian lead, they embraced him with a fervor and enthusiasm that was unprecedented in cinema history. Through his groundbreaking films, Lee single-handedly revolutionized how Asians were portrayed in cinema, shattering stereotypes that had persisted for decades. No longer were Asian actors confined to the limiting roles of subservient servants, one-dimensional villains, or simplistic comic relief characters. Lee demonstrated with undeniable power that an Asian man could be the consummate hero, strong, intelligent, charismatic, and worthy of profound respect. His performances created a new paradigm that opened doors for generations of Asian actors who would follow in his footsteps. But Lee's influence extends far beyond the boundaries of cinema, permeating numerous aspects of modern culture. Today, nearly 50 years after his untimely death, his philosophical principles continue to inspire millions across incredibly diverse fields. Perhaps nowhere is this enduring impact more evident and profound than in the dynamic world of mixed martial arts, where his influence shapes every aspect of modern combat sports. Dana White, the influential president of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, has repeatedly and emphatically called Bruce Lee the father of mixed martial arts. This statement isn't mere hyperbole or marketing rhetoric. It's a recognition of fundamental truth. Lee's revolutionary Jeet Kune Do philosophy, which emphasizes taking what works from different fighting styles and discarding what doesn't, is precisely the pragmatic approach that defines modern MMA. His emphasis on practical effectiveness over traditional forms laid the groundwork for today's evolved combat sports landscape. "The perfect style is no style," Lee famously declared, articulating a principle that would become foundational to modern combat sports. "You take good things from every different discipline, you use what works, and you throw the rest away." This revolutionary approach to martial arts training is exactly what today's elite fighters embrace, seamlessly combining elements of boxing, wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and Muay Thai into a cohesive and effective fighting system. This cross-disciplinary approach, radical in Lee's time, has become the standard methodology in contemporary combat sports. Modern champions like Anderson Silva, known for his matrix-like striking ability, Conor McGregor with his precision counter-striking, and Israel Adesanya, celebrated for his dynamic kickboxing, have all explicitly cited Lee as a major influence on their fighting philosophy and approach to combat. These elite athletes embody his core principle of adaptability, demonstrating the ability to flow seamlessly between striking and grappling, between aggressive offense and calculated counterfighting, adjusting their tactics based on what each unique situation demands. Their success validates Lee's forward-thinking approach to martial arts. The very concept of cross-training in multiple disciplines, which forms the essential foundation of MMA, aligns perfectly with Lee's revolutionary philosophy. His unwavering emphasis on practicality over tradition, on real-world effectiveness over aesthetic appeal, has become the guiding principle of modern combat sports. This approach has transformed martial arts from rigid, style-specific practices into the dynamic, evolving sport we see today. Beyond the realm of martial arts, Lee's philosophical principles have permeated countless other fields, demonstrating their universal applicability. In the corporate world, his adaptability principles have influenced innovative leaders like Amazon's Jeff Bezos, who famously echoed Lee's sentiments when he stated, "What's dangerous is not to evolve." In the technology sector, Apple's fundamental design philosophy mirrors Lee's emphasis on simplicity, functionality, and the elimination of the unnecessary. Even in the fields of psychology and personal development, Lee's profound ideas about self-actualization and authentic self-expression have become foundational concepts that continue to shape modern thinking. His immortal words, "Be water, my friend," have transcended their origins in martial arts philosophy to become a universal mantra for adaptability in our rapidly changing modern world. When legendary NBA coach Phil Jackson guided Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls to their historic 6 championships, he consciously incorporated Lee's fluid philosophy into his coaching methodology. The results spoke for themselves as the Bulls dominated the NBA throughout the 1990s. Jordan himself, widely regarded as basketball's greatest player and one of the most dominant athletes in any sport, was an ardent Lee fan who frequently credited the martial artist's mental approach and philosophical principles for much of his success on the court. The depth and breadth of Lee's influence across such diverse fields, from combat sports to business, from technology to professional basketball, demonstrates the universal applicability of his philosophical principles. His ideas about adaptability, efficiency, and authentic self-expression continue to resonate because they address fundamental truths about human performance and potential. Whether in the octagon, the boardroom, or the basketball court, Lee's principles provide a framework for excellence that transcends cultural and professional boundaries. His legacy lives on, not just in the martial arts world he revolutionized, but in the countless individuals and fields that continue to find wisdom and practical guidance in his philosophical teachings. In fashion, Lee's iconic yellow jumpsuit from Game of Death has become one of the most recognizable and influential costumes in cinema history. This striking outfit, with its bold color and minimalist design, not only inspired Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill costume design, but has become a symbol of martial arts culture worldwide. The jumpsuit's influence extends far beyond cinema, inspiring countless streetwear collections from major fashion houses and independent designers alike. High-end brands like Balmain and Supreme have released collections paying homage to Lee's distinctive style, while his image and philosophy continue to influence contemporary fashion aesthetics. In the realm of music, the legendary Wu-Tang Clan didn't just casually reference Kung Fu. They built their entire artistic identity around it, with Bruce Lee serving as their philosophical and aesthetic cornerstone. RZA, the group's mastermind, has frequently spoken about how Lee's principles shaped not just their image but their approach to music making. The group's name itself comes from the kung fu film Shaolin and Wu-Tang, and their lyrics are peppered with references to Lee's philosophy and martial arts wisdom. This influence has rippled through hip-hop culture, inspiring countless artists to incorporate martial arts themes and philosophy into their work. In the gaming industry, Li's impact is equally profound. Characters like Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat aren't merely superficial tributes. They embody Li's fighting philosophy and movement principles. The game's creators meticulously studied Li's techniques, incorporating his signature moves like the one-inch punch and his distinctive fighting stance. Modern fighting games continue to draw from Li's legacy, with titles like Tekken and Street Fighter featuring characters whose fighting styles and philosophies echo Li's teachings. Perhaps Li's most transformative impact has been on Asian representation in global media. Before his emergence, Hollywood's portrayal of Asians was mired in racist caricatures and demeaning stereotypes. Asian men were particularly marginalized, often depicted as weak, submissive, or villainous. Li single-handedly shattered these stereotypes, presenting an Asian protagonist who was not only physically powerful but intellectually sharp, charismatic, and uncompromisingly heroic. His performances commanded respect and admiration, forcing Hollywood to reconsider its approach to Asian characters. This groundbreaking work has reverberated through the decades, paving the way for the current renaissance in Asian cinema and representation. Contemporary successes like Crazy Rich Asians, which broke box office records and cultural barriers, built upon the foundation Li established. The Oscar-winning Parasite and the genre-defying Everything Everywhere All at Once demonstrate the growing global appetite for Asian stories told with authenticity and complexity. When Simu Liu stepped into the role of Shang-Chi, Marvel's first Asian superhero, he explicitly acknowledged his debt to Li's pioneering work. His statement, "Without Bruce Lee, there would be no Shang-Chi," encapsulates how Li's influence continues to open doors for new generations of Asian talent. What truly sets Li's legacy apart is its universal resonance. His philosophy transcends the boundaries of martial arts, film, and cultural identity, speaking to fundamental human truths. His teachings address our universal desire to grow, adapt, and express ourselves authentically in a world that often pressures us to conform to predetermined molds. Li's famous water metaphor, "Be water, my friend," encapsulates this universal wisdom. This wasn't merely martial arts instruction, it was a profound life philosophy. Water's ability to adapt without losing its essence, to flow around obstacles rather than fighting them, to take any shape while maintaining its fundamental nature. These are metaphors for personal growth and resilience that resonate across cultures and generations. This philosophy teaches us that true strength lies not in rigid resistance, but in flexible adaptation, not in fighting against change, but in embracing it as an opportunity for growth. This is the ultimate lesson of Bruce Li's life, a lesson that continues to inspire and guide people across all walks of life, from fighters to artists, from entrepreneurs to everyday individuals seeking their path.